Hi, John. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
Good, yeah. Really good, yeah.
The Oasis reunion starts next week. I've got your book here, a sort of, a biography of the band, isn't it? From the childhood, and then it goes through the albums to the current day, really. When did you start writing the book?
About 8 months ago. So it was a bit of a fast turnaround, but it's a lot of hours. It's like about 15 hours a day. I mean, it's intense writing a book. It's full on, and you don't want to miss anything out and you want to get it right. So you have to keep double, triple checking everything, then doing the interviews and everything. Because you don't want to you don't want it to be a flimsy knockoff. It has to be a proper book. So yeah, but I got it done, got it out, thank God.
So with the book, I knew it'd be a great read because I read your Stone Roses one that you did a while ago, and I really enjoyed that one. Uh, do you enjoy writing about these Manchester bands and going through their history?
Yeah, yeah. I love pop music. I love pop culture, but I like history as well. I like people's history because the history we always got at school was this history of kings and queens. I'm not interested in kings and queens. I want to know what people are actually doing. It's all right if you're in a palace with jesters running around, but what's going on in mad little towns in the middle of nowhere? That's always interested me. So when you can see it firsthand, then you can document it. That's the fascination of it. In a way, it's just using the bands to tell the story of the times, isn't it? Really. So it's funny. Like somebody said the book to them because he'd had the Roses book and it was like part two. It's because you get to the end of the Roses book and it's sort of like that's when Oasis kind of start. Well, kind of start, don't they? Just before Second Coming comes out, there's Oasis, and they kind of steal the Roses thunder, don't they? And it's that little thing where it's an overlap between the two. And it was like a part two. And I found that quite interesting. And I mean, there's so many crossovers between the two bands, and without the Roses, you probably wouldn't get Oasis, would you?
No, that's what Noel says as well, and Liam. They both say the same thing, don't they?
Yeah, I mean that gig at the International was such a key gig, wasn't it? When Liam saw Ian Brown on stage, and then he saw his future. I mean, he made his own version of it, of course, but that was a moment when he realised what he could actually do. Because I think Liam, it seems like he already knew he was going to be something, but he just didn't know what that something was. And Ian Brown on stage that night in '88, he saw what he could be. I like. It's quite funny that gig because the three brothers, three Gallaghers, they all went separately from each other. They didn't all go together, which is quite kind of tells you a lot about them, doesn't it? Well, it tells you a lot about all brothers, isn't it? Because it's kind of you don't really go to gig with your brother. It's a bit naff, isn't it?
It's like Noel as well, though, at that gig. He met Graham from Inspiral Carpets, and that kick-started his career in the music business as well, didn't it?
Yeah, that's a really cool story. And the book's got these really great set piece stories, hasn't it? And that's one of them. He just sees this guy recording gigs. And I remember Graham at the time, the gigs, every gig he went to, he'd be recording. Even when I played my band, he'd be standing at who's that kid who's always recording stuff? You didn't see, like now, everybody's got a phone out and they're filming it. But then you hardly ever saw anybody recording anything. And that was him. So I actually knew him as well from recording stuff. I said, what are you recording? And he said he called all his bands. So he's kind of known as a bit, Noel talks about this, and he talks about in the book when he gave me a little quote to put in the book. He talks about the Manchester 50, the people that went to every gig you went to, and Graham was one of those people. And Noel was as well. He's like the youngest one, but there's like a lot of people that went to everything in town. There weren't as many gigs then, so you got to know the crowd. The core of the crowd. So Noel goes up to Graham. That's what he called in a gig because I mean the Roses only had one single out at that point in time, and so he wanted more of their music, and so Graham's posting him a tape, and that's how he got to know him. He said, then Graham said it's quite funny actually because Graham said he's trying to get Noel to stop talking. He didn't want him talking over the tape when he's recording it because you just got this mad conversation. But what he did say is, so what gig are you going to after this? He said, I'm going to have to see the Spiral Carpets next week at the International. He said, I'm in the Spiral Carpets. And that's how we got to know him, which is such a cool story, isn't it? Like, it's so just people bumping into each other and things happening. It's a long way from Simon Cowell and people and the machinations of showbiz, isn't it? When they put bands together, it's just a bunch of kids bumping into each other, isn't it? Who are big music fanatics and making bands up. It was fucking brilliant, isn't it? That's always the best music, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So you've been in and around the music scene since the 70s. What was your first? Well, when did you first hear of Oasis?
Well, I knew Noel first, so I didn't know him super well. I just knew him from going around a gig. So you just nod on, say hello, what you go to next week, that kind of level. And then he was working for the Spirals for about almost 4 years. People forget how long he worked with the Spirals for. So you see him around a lot then because he moved into town. He was living in India House. So he's back. He's in town. Then he's at even more gigs, and then you see him. And then because I was interviewing Spirals a lot and reviewing their gigs when I was writing for Sound. So it's and I see Noel a lot of these events and stuff. And he's always quite funny because we always used to think, what does Noel exactly do for Inspire Carpets? Because he's meant to be the roadie, but you never saw him do anything like carrying gear around. I mean, I'm sure I've made this up in my head, but my image of it is that their band would come in carrying the gear and Noel sort of wandering behind them. but every Manchester band had a cool mate, the one who had the best hair, clothes, the one who's a bit more hip, and I mean the coolest thing about the Spirals is they weren't hip, they're just really great being the Spirals, and they are one of the greatest Manchester bands and ace bands. And but Noel's one is a bit more into the kind of the street clothes and styling of it all. Not, I mean, obviously Liam was a bit more, but Noel's there like cool mates, and you see like every Manchester band had a cool mate on his payroll. Like Bez with the Mondays or Cressa with the Roses, the one who had the right trousers, and that seemed to be part of his job. Then it turns out he was also on the phone all the time. He's kind of, it wasn't the manager, but he's organising, arranging loads of stuff as well. So his role in it was really interesting. Me learned a lot from being with Spirals and being with Clint Boone. He's like a brilliant organizer, but he was so savvy. He got to know everybody in town, so he got to know the Roses, the Mondays. Everybody knew Noel, and everyone liked him as well because he's charming, he's funny, and he's not a twat at all. He's not. You know, when he does interviews, people think he's, oh yeah, the Gallaghers, they're just big gobshites. We're actually not really like that, are they? They're just funny. They're the funniest people, probably some of the funniest people I've met. Their timing, comic timing is fantastic, but also they're actually quite nice, and charming, which is not the tabloid version of their story. So everybody really liked him. So when he finally got the band together, or when he joined the band, basically, there was a lot of goodwill towards him. People wanted it to do well because Noel's in it. It was like Noel's band, even though it wasn't actually his band, really, was it? It was like Bonehead's band and Liam's band.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned interviewing Noel there. You've got the famous interview now on the Oasis channel that came out not long before the reunion was announced. Did you film that in June?
Yeah, that was done in June last year, and then it got put out on the YouTube channel about 3 months later. So, if you're looking at, if you didn't know that, it looked like Noel did this interview and 2 days later they reformed, but actually there's about 3 month gap between the two.
Did you have any inclination then that there was a reunion going to happen?
Not more or less than anybody else would have, I mean, and what I found out, I still don't really know the exact lineage of the Reformation, but I think what happened in about January, the promoters had started trying to get booking the venues basically, and my guess is you get the venues first, then you say to the band, "Are you up for it?" And then the band kind of go, I'm not sure. Then, or here's this. It takes a bit of time, the money goes up a bit more, and then at some point somebody says yes. So whether they said yes in January and just kept it really quiet, or they said about waiting until about 2 days before they announced it, I've no idea. I mean, nobody's letting on really exactly what. Because in a way, it kind of spoils it if you know every single detail, doesn't it? I like it when bands just, like the Roses one, which was the perfect reformation, when they just seemed to appear from nowhere, didn't they? Like one day just seemed like no way would the Roses ever reform, and the next day they had, and they've been rehearsing in town for about 3 months, and nobody even noticed. And that kind of mystery is pretty good, I think, in music. You don't, even if I known they were going to reform or any of these bands reform, I wouldn't tell anybody because it spoils the fun, doesn't it? It's good. It's great.
Yeah.
One day you look at your phone and think, fucking hell, they've reformed.
Yeah, well, they put that announcement out. It went crazy, didn't it?
It did, didn't it? And it's, even though, I mean, it's different. The difference between the Roses and Oasis reform was you've got the feeling that at some point Oasis probably would make up and maybe reform. With the Stone Roses, it felt like they would never ever reform, and that it was a bit more of a shock when the Roses reformed. But when Oasis reformed, it was still exciting. Just the size of it, the sheer scale of it. Because I think a lot of people have forgotten just how massive they were. They were like a generational defining band. I mean, for people of that age, 45 to 50 probably, it's the band that's in the middle of that generation. And whether they like the band or not, it defines a generation, innit? Because you get a lot of a stick as well, which if you are really big bands, there's always going, for every person that likes it, somebody doesn't like you. But by not liking the band as well, it's defining their generation because the things they don't like about their band are all reasons of their time, So I'm sure it's the same to the Beatles and the Stones in the 60s. If everyone that liked the Beatles, there'd be loads of people saying, oh, they're just a boy band or they're just this or just that. But you can't get away from the fact that they were the bands that defined that generation, like Bowie did in the 70s, and typically my generation, our defining band, the Pistols, fell apart after about a year. So at least Oasis or the other generations, they managed to have bands that lasted a bit longer. Yeah.
You mentioned there, like Oasis came along and they were the 90s, really. After Kurt Cobain died, did you feel like something was always going to come along, or where did you think guitar music was going to go after that?
I think even before Kurt Cobain dies, there was, selected the Britpop cover, didn't they, in '93, and so there was a move towards British bands and not grunge bands. But then I never saw Nirvana as being a grunge band. I mean, all the bands they put in a scene with, they weren't really like them. They were quite different from them, I think Nirvana musically are closer to Oasis, really. The both bands do the Sex Beatles thing, and it's like that wall of sound and guitars of the Pistols, but also that melodic nous of the Beatles, the brilliant melodies. But the crucial difference is that Oasis has lived forever, and Nirvana is I hate myself and want to die. And it's there's a positive and a negative. Oasis music has always been about escape, and it. I live in a shit town, and in my life I've got a shit job and that. But as soon as you put that record on, you escape, you transcend it, and it's about Noel trying to get out of Burnage, in it, and that sense escape. Whereas Nirvana would be, my life is really shit, and I'm going to take loads of drugs and try and blot it out. And which, I'm not saying I don't think it's what you should do in your life, but it's a valid response to shitness, in a way. It was just a negative one, a nihilistic one. And what was great about Oasis, it was about get up and go. Like Noel says, like the worst days on the dole. He got up in the morning and he's about, I'm going to check, something's going to happen today, and that kind of optimism and escapism is very much part of Oasis. But also, there's a melancholy as well in Oasis as well. There is a sadness, and I think all the greatest Manchester bands could do melancholy and euphoria at the same time. So even Joy Division, which are, famously one of the saddest bands, what a sad story is, and the music is dark, but also they're one of the greatest bands ever to dance to. Their records are up as well. So I think it's something unique to Manchester that you can do both at the same time,
I wanted to ask you about that, actually. You mentioned there, definitely maybe is about like escapism and getting out of Burnage for Noel. You did the interview in Sifters, where they grew up. Could you feel that when you were there, that like the history of that album?
What was really cool was when I used to go to Sifters as well in the 80s, not as much as they did, because I lived in Withington then, so it's just the other side of the park. But they're around the corner. All the posters on the wall of all the classic bands. So he's got like all these faded posters of Beatles, Stones, U2, Hendrix, Doors, and there's only one new poster up on the wall, and it's of Oasis. And I thought, that is it, isn't it? Like now, Oasis have now got so big, they've actually got a poster up on Sifter's wall.
Crazy, isn't it?
It's the only thing that's different. When we were in him, we just did a little chat before we did the interview. He found a copy of Red Rose Speedway, and I was thinking, fucking hell, because it's in the video, isn't it? In the Oasis video years ago. Somebody pulls it out of the rack. Thinking, is that the same album? Has it actually been there for about 40 years now? That shop never changes, does it? You go in, and it's just like the same second-hand records he's had for years, and he's still the same old dude behind the counter, isn't he, like Pete? And he's quite funny because he said when they made it, he goes, he didn't really know who they were. And he goes, oh, I'm sure that kid comes in the shop. But that shop's so key to the story, isn't it? Like, he'd be going in there and sometimes buying the records or taping them and bringing them back and stuff. But it was always greatest hits, wasn't it? That's what he's dead into. And and I think if you're going to learn about how to make pop music, the greatest hits records are the ones to get. They're not the cool ones to get. But if you want to know what a verse and a chorus is, you go and get the Beatles' greatest hits and T-Rex greatest hits. They'll teach you everything you need to know how to make great guitar music. I mean, obviously, you have a deeper dive afterwards, don't you? But I think Citrus is key to the story. I think that's where a lot of the music influence was coming in. So it was a perfect place to do the Definitely Maybe interview, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I agreed with what you said in the interview as well, that Definitely Maybe is a greatest hits album, really, isn't it?
Yeah, every song's a single, isn't it?
Yeah.
They could have released each track as a single, and 2 years later put it out as compiled it into a greatest hits album, and it wouldn't seem odd, would it? There isn't one. I mean, I like a lot of experimental, mad, fucked up music as well, but there isn't a track on the album that does that. Their forte and the brilliance of Oasis is they were just a pop band, great pop bands, and in the end of the day, it's all pop music, isn't it? And growing up in punk, and people are snobby about pop music, but one of the great things about the Sex Pistols was they're one of the greatest pop bands ever. Again, another album where every song is killer. There's no throwaway tracks stuck in there. So definitely maybe it was like that, and it's kind of the sound of a band that spent 2.5 years sort of leading up to that record, and there's something about an album, a band's first album, isn't there? It's the band at their purest, isn't it? And it's a lineup of lads who were in a room for like weeks and end every day, honing this thing down. I think, and it's in a way, it's almost a perfect lineup. And I mean, they had great lineups afterwards. And like somebody said, every drummer suits every period of the bands. But there's something about Tony's drumming in there, like
Yeah.
kind of little, yeah. He's a powerful drummer, four to the floor punk rock drummer, but he has that kind of lazy swing as well, which is important in the sound of Oasis. But I really like the later records. I don't think he would have suited those later records so much because he's a completely different band by the sixth and seventh albums, and they're playing with loops then and doing different stuff, which I really liked. And I'm glad they didn't keep repeating the first album. But the first album, there's a purity to it, the purity of people who grew up together from the same kind of part of town, same in jokes, same arguments, probably same influences all going in the pot. And there's just something about those kind of records. You can never get it again. You could keep the same lineup and you spend the next 20 years trying to repeat that. You never will. So in a way, you're probably right to try and change it,
Oh, yeah, definitely. You mentioned there it was like years of falling down the craft. I think there's a bit of a misconception about Oasis that they formed, got that gig in Glasgow, and then everything happened from there. But you see in your book that they did have record labels turn them down, and they were practicing like 5 nights a week as well, weren't they?
Oh yeah, they're rehearsing all the time. The boardwalk. We were next door. We'd rehearse about every few weeks. You go in, and they'd be still in there rehearsing the same riff. They do Eye in the Walrus riff all afternoon until they got it right, got it perfect. They were grafters, They knew you had to work hard to escape, no, because no one been in a band, and the Spirals were hard workers as well. I mean, there's no such thing as off the cuff genius. You have to work hard at genius. You have to, you can get the inspiration to write a song. The song could come in 2 minutes, but it could be the year before you've been playing your guitar for hours and ends to know where to put your hands to get that chord, whatever. And then to get the band to play it, and so it's so effortless. I mean, nobody would touch them for years, would they? There was it was about 2 years, and the vibe was for the London music business that Manchester's had its turn. There won't be any more Manchester bands, That's inconceivable. They've already had a few bands. I mean, you think, what kind of attitude is that? London's allowed to have bands endlessly, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, and it's really important, I think, in the story, which does lead up to the other great story in the book. The McGee story, because when McGee saw them, I mean, a normal record label will go, yeah, they're all right, but it's a Manchester band. No one dresses like this anymore. The music scene's gone back to London. This just won't work. That's when McGee actually told people in London he's going to sign it. People thought he's mad. You know, they were going, it's over. You can't have another Stone Roses. That's what people thought. I don't understand how music could be like that. I mean, McGee was right. When he saw it, he goes, "This is the fucking greatest band I've ever seen." I mean, I love that story. It's just one of the greatest stories of music. I mean, the chances of that happening, that gig, are about 1,000,000 to 1, aren't they? I mean, it was Sister Lover who blagged the gig in the first place to get themselves on the bill, and they went to Glasgow to play their first gig. I'd forgotten that they hadn't played Manchester, and as Noel was coming into rehearsal Oasis after Sister Lover rehearsed because they shared a rehearsal room, Debbie said, "Oh, we're off to Glasgow to do a gig," and Noel looked really disappointed. She said, "Oh, why don't you come as well?" You can't do that. I mean, you can't just turn up. Well, you can't just blag a gig third on the bill and turn up with another band and say, "Oh, is it all right if these play?" I mean, that just doesn't happen. But somehow they got up there and Oasis drove all the way to Glasgow uninvited and blagged themselves onto the bill to play 4 songs. So that's a remote chance of that. And somehow Alan McGee, exactly the right person they need to play to, happens to be in the venue because he knew Debbie. And he goes, "I'll go and see what that first band's like." And he walks in, first song, fucking greatest band I've ever seen. Second song, wow. And when they do On the Walrus, he thinks, "Oh, no one could cover that." And he goes, "Oh my God, it's insane, it's brilliant." And McGee being McGee, he's not standing there, "Oh, that might not work, that might not sell." He's going, "I'm fucking signing these." And he goes off to where find Noel, and he virtually signs them on the spot. I saw Noel, I think it was the day after that, walking down Whitby Street, and he said, "Alan McGee, what do you reckon? He wants to sign us?" I go, "Oh my God, that's perfect." Because I knew Alan because we were on Creation in my band. I knew Alan before Creation, and I know what he's like, and I knew that Alan was kind of mad enough to make it work. You know, and also because he's a music fanatic, and Alan's love had always been '60s psychedelia and punk rock. I mean, and so Juice Mary Chain, in a sense, who we'd had in '84 for the first single, managed for a bit, were the first version of that because they had that punky wall of sound, but they also had that psychedelic '60s vibe. And then when Oasis come along, it's just like, wow, this is it, the perfect version, you know, because it's not only a band that sounds great, but then he always says that when Liam walks on stage, he just looked like a complete star, you know. And I think that's the difference between Oasis. I mean, we all know it, don't we? The two keys they had was Noel wrote brilliant songs and Liam was a brilliant, you know, a proper rock and roll star. People, there's a guy who goes to my gym who worked with Liam when Liam was a kid, and Liam would be in a van and all the banters going around. And he's going, "You wouldn't say that to me because I'm going to be the biggest star in Britain in 2 years." A big old fuck off, you know. And then he was. And people always say, "Well, that's a bit big-headed." But you think, if you were Liam Gallagher at 18 and you're walking around and you're pretty cool and you look good, you're going to think, "Well, I am a bit of a star." I mean, it's like, how can Noel Gallagher? You can't be modest, can you, about it too much? I know you're meant to be in Britain and that, but Noel Gallagher can't say, "Yeah, I'm an okay songwriter." You know, it's just, I'm lucky. I mean, that's what you meant to say if you're British. What if you are the best songwriter of your generation? What you meant to say? I, sometimes you just have to say it as it is, don't you?
You say that in the book as well, like they were the first band to come along and say stuff like that. Other bands wanted to be like indie and not make it as big as that Oasis did, but Oasis always said they were going to be the biggest band in the world.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just also genuinely didn't believe in them really massive. I mean, the Roses had done it, and I think they're so influential in this, but the Roses said we're going to be the biggest band in Britain, and nothing else is. We don't want anything else. I mean, the thing about the Roses was they also had this ability to implode, didn't they? Grab defeat for the jaws of victory all the time. So, and the Smiths as well. I mean, Johnny Marr didn't put the Smiths together to just be an indie band. He wasn't looking at like being in the indie charts, that this had to be the biggest band in Britain. They got pretty close to pulling that off. But Oasis kind of transcended both those bands because they were just 100 times bigger, weren't they? I think it's the thing a lot of people miss, isn't it? People always think of Oasis just being this big band with the tabloid story of it, the tabloid version of it. But when you really think about it, the line from the Smiths to Oasis is direct, isn't it? I mean, I think Noel and Johnny Marr, they're like brothers, aren't they? Musical brothers. They look similar, and they both have the same influences, interests, and attitudes in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, well, we mentioned before the reunion news was massive. Obviously, it sold out straight away. Do you think with this reunion, we'll see what's the word? Like the guitar music scene revived and back in the main?
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day because there's a couple of interesting things going on here. Like a lot of the audience are actually really young, so a lot of people never saw Oasis first time round. So, but there's people like when Liam does his gigs, there's like 14, 15-year-old kids there. He's gone. They go through the generations. And what's going to be really interesting is if all those people turn up at these gigs and the gigs are amazing and there's a really top atmosphere. Of course, people are going to go. Let's have a go. We're going to do this, and most of them will never get anywhere, but they'll have fun. I think it's not bad with a career, and this is probably the opposite of the Oasis thing. But you don't have to be the biggest band in Britain to be in a band, and it's valid. You can just go and be in a band and have a really good time with your mates, when you're young, and try and be creative and try and do something. Because creativity just shouldn't be for posh kids, which is fine. There's a lot of posh kids make great music, but it's just a normal kid should have a chance as well. And hopefully, a lot of normal kids in the States, in shitty little towns that no one cares about across Britain, will have a go and try and do something, and try and create something in their lives, which is important, isn't it? It's good for your head and that. So, so I think there will be a knock-on effect, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be with guitars. They can do it any way they want, if they start with Oasis and end up being a rapper, or if they end up making electronic dance records, that's cool as well. It's and I think that to me that could be the most important thing that comes out of these gigs. So this is the bigger thing that's happened. In pop, it's the biggest thing that's happened in pop culture for years in this country, and it's for the week of the Manchester gigs, the whole city centre of Manchester is full of pop-up Oasis shops, theme nights, gigs, bars, playing Oasis stuff. It's like a cultural phenomenon, isn't it? It's the Britpop summer. It's already started with Pulp getting to number one on the albums, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy. Like, there's a lot of these bands reforming as well from that era and playing shows.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's mad, really. And we think if you ever had if you had a couple of hits, you may as well go and play them, haven't you? Because I know it's not art, is it? And art's important, but it's also fun, And if you're late 50s and you're in a band and two people love your songs from years ago, get the band together, go and play them, and everyone can have a good time. The world's so fucked up, but people shouldn't be hung up about having a good time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, I don't think it'll happen. Like you said, you don't have to be the biggest band, but do you think we'll ever see a band as big as Oasis again?
I think one thing in pop culture, you can never dictate what's about to happen. So, I mean, you couldn't even guess Oasis could be as big as it wasn't it, at the time. You knew they had something, but you wouldn't say at that time, oh yeah, there's definitely going to be a massive cultural phenomenon, and it's going to come out of Manchester or wherever. So it's not predictable, but I think it's harder now. I think pop culture is fractured. Lots of people like lots of different things at the same time. You're also competing with the past because of the streaming. If you were like 13 getting really into music, you can listen to the Beatles. So what chance has your mate round the corner got when the stuff's already out there, There's also a lot of stuff to listen to. You're competing with 70 years of pop culture. It's a lot harder to do it. There's a lot less money around. It's hard to sustain it. And I mean, it doesn't mean there won't be big bands. I mean, Fontaine's DC are turning into really big bands. They're doing 30,000 in Manchester at that gig at Wythenshawe in August, and I don't think it's an overnight thing. I think it's Fontaine's taking 4 or 5 albums to get to that level, but they're getting close to that level. But to get Oasis is a freak show, isn't it? To get to that level, very rarely people do. And I was thinking that writing a book. So What's the Story was sold, 23 million copies. That's insane. That's Michael Jackson territory. Very few rock bands get anywhere over 20 million sales on an album, and it's still in the top 40. It's in the top 40 every week. It just keeps going and going and going. And some Beatles records didn't sell as many as it. You talk about a very rarefied atmosphere of success that Oasis got to. Where they're big, but I think people forget how big they actually really were.
Yeah, and you were one of the first people to hear the songs off of Morning Glory, weren't you?
Well, yeah, because I was producing this other band um, called Cable. I was in Mono Valley, and so we knew Oasis were in the studio because Mono Valley is about a mile away from Rockfield. It's owned by there's two brothers own them, don't get on with each other. That seems to be a theme in this story. So, and so we on the last night we went to town. We went to the pub with the band to celebrate finishing the Cable album. We bumped into Liam Gallagher in the taxi. There's only one taxi in the village, and it was going back to Rockfield. So he got off. He said, "Do you want to hear the album?" So he went back there and he had a part and he got Cable pretty drunk. They weren't drinkers at all. And he brought the tape in and he started playing the tracks. And I was going, "Whoa, fuck, that sounds good." So he played Hello and probably Champagne Supernova for Remember. Because at the time I didn't realise I had to remember all this 30 years later. But I was the only one who was sober, so I could remember more than everyone else. And the guys at Cable were really drunk and they started slagging it off. Going, just like the Beatles. I was going, "Oh, sure, just he's giving you drinks." And then he threw pasta at Liam. And then it really did push Liam over the edge. Liam, it sounds like Liam was like this mad maniac, but he's actually in a really good mood most of the time. So the bloke out of Cable really did push it. And then there was a bit of a handbag scuffle. And then I had to drag Cable out the studio. So I did hear 4 of the songs that he's playing off cassettes and things. Like, because he'd only done the vocals for Champagne Supernova that afternoon. Then he went to the pub, which is classic Liam, isn't it? Like, off to the pub.
Yeah.
He sang all the songs about 3 times, wasn't he? And then perfectly, this is what O'Morris said, it was freaky. You know, Noel come in with a song like Wonderwall, which he'd just written 2 days before, and just play it to Liam on a guitar, sing the melody, show him the lyrics, and Liam would go in and sing it perfectly. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a studio, but it's really hard to get a perfect vocal, especially if it's somebody else's song. And he got all, not just the melodies, he got all the intonation, the phrasing, he got it all just perfectly right, you know. And it's Owen Morris said that Liam said to him, what did he say? He said, "Oh, these songs, right, they're inside me," and they were Noel's songs. So in a way, Noel's writing the songs, but Liam was channeling them, which is that's quite an amazing thing. That even though the fames are falling out all the time, there's a weird sort of closeness as well. You know, where they totally understand the songs. You know, they both understand the songs. Like it's coming out the same place in a weird way.
Do you think that's only a thing brothers have, like that telepathic like thing with the songs where they both know? Well, where Liam knows what Noel's trying to say.
I think they definitely had that. Yeah, yeah. I think most of the time they weren't fighting. I think there's probably about 10 massive fights through that 16 years of the band, which actually is less than most bands. I mean, when they had fights, they were obviously famous fights because they would get straight to the papers. And they had proper fights, but most bands actually what they do is they just have simmering resentment that goes on for years and then nobody says anything. And then they split up, because it's a weird situation. I was thinking that in the book as well, they spent 16, 17 years sharing a tiny bedroom in a council house in Burnage. And then you get in a band together, then you spend 16 years on the road together on a tour bus. They couldn't get away from each other. That would drive you mad, wouldn't it? It's not because they're difficult people. I think it's just they're really, for 30 odd years, they were stuck together, weren't they? Like Siamese twins. That's a very difficult thing to cope with. And also the pressure of being in a band, everyone's looking at you, everyone's expecting to do this and that. And the littlest things become the biggest things. It's a weird situation. So it's like, I think it was Owen Morris again. He said when they split up, he was surprised they actually managed to keep it going that long. Because 16 years and 7 albums is quite a long career for rock and roll bands.
Yeah, like with that fight at Rockfield, they nearly split up, only having 1 album out and half an album finished, didn't they?
Yeah, I think, they were never going to stop at that point. But there was definitely a couple of weeks when Noel didn't really want to do it. He went to London to just get away from it all. But the stakes are high then, weren't they? I mean, it's pretty obvious this album was going to be fucking massive. The first album already done an awful lot of records. And this album, everyone's going, whoa, listen to the songs on this. And so it's, even if it'd been like utter resentment, you'd have gone back and finished the album off. But it turns out he just went back after a couple of weeks, he had a hug and carried on and nobody said anything. It was just like, oh, that was a bit of a mad night, wasn't it?
Liam said that to you, didn't he, when he saw you?
I think he did. Yeah, I think he did. Yeah. I mean, they were just, a lot of people in their lives have these kind of mad flash ups, don't they? In any kind of job. It's just because everyone's watching, that's the thing, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
That story became really famous, didn't it? So they couldn't escape their own story.
You were writing about Britpop at the time, a lot of stuff. What was it like for you living through that scene?
Well, the first thing is I was using the word Britpop 8 years before it became a word. Not because I'm really cool or anything or anything like that, because it's not even that great a word, is it? But it's like a joke word. And one thing you do as a music writer. You make up words just to see what happens, you know, and will this stick? And it didn't stick. For every now and then it would pop up, and suddenly it became the front cover of Select and became a word for this scene. And now what's interesting about that cover, and it's a really good piece, and Stu McConey, what he did was culturally important, wasn't it? Because it was basically saying grunge is over, there's a British scene now, you know. And but what's really interesting about that piece is the bands, Suede are the main band, they're on the cover. It's the Auteurs, Pulp, Etienne, and Denon. That's Britpop. It's bands that live in London, not all from London, but they're living in London at the time. And it's a Blur, who'd already had an album at that point and not in that piece. They're not looked on as being Britpop at all. Blur, at that point in time, are part of the scene that celebrates itself, which is another made-up music biz term. And they hang around the Syndrome Club in London, and even a bit shoegazy, those kind of bands who were hanging out with them, they weren't looked on as being anything Britpop at all. And Oasis weren't known at that time because they're just rehearsing up in Manchester. So when the Battle of Britpop comes along 2 years later, it's between two bands who were not considered Britpop in the first place, who both didn't really want to be Britpop at all.
How did you get into music journalism? Because you started that when you were in the membranes, didn't you?
Yeah, well, in punk, it was about the greatest message of punk was, and you can just have a go, just do it, you know. So I went and did a band. I didn't have a fucking clue what we're doing, but we just went to be in a band. We just wanted to be in a band. So we didn't have any musical knowledge or talent, probably. And then the other one was you could write as well. People did fanzines. So we started doing a fanzine, and then I got onto Zigzag, which was a music magazine, and onto Sounds, and then it just rolled on from there. But it was never like a career plan. I was just writing stuff, you know. To this day, you know, even this morning, it was just reviewing a Farm album on the website. I just open up my laptop and start writing. I don't think I never really learned how to do it properly, you know, because I know some people do it like they do a course, don't they, and how to be music journalists. All the best writers, I think, are the ones who just write stuff and they do it in their own voice and they do it off the cuff. I don't think you have to be. I don't even think you have to be that eloquent to be a music writer. I mean, it can be really great intellectual, academic, eloquent writing. I like that. But I also just like it when a kid says, I really fucking love this record. To me, that's as valid because music, there should be no rules in music, and you can't do a course and you can't pass a course in making music or writing about it. You just feel it, don't you? It's an intangible, isn't it? And it's great when anybody has a go at doing it. I'm a firm believer in that. That's my punk rock ethic.
Yeah, I agree.
Everybody have a go. Yeah.
I agree with that because, like you say, it's more passionate as well. Isn't it? Like if you're going to pass a course, you're more seeing it as a career, whereas if you're just doing it, you're more passionate about it, aren't you?
I think so. Yeah, there's a space for all of it, basically. You know, there's a space, you know, for the in-depth academic writing. You know, John Savage is a brilliant writer,
Yeah.
but there's also space for your mates down the road who's just dead into music to start doing a blog or just put it on their socials or anything, just flagging up great bits of music for people because it's typed out word of mouth a lot of the time, isn't it? It's how we find out about stuff, isn't it?
Well, obviously there was no social media back then. So how important were fanzines to you and music fans?
They were pretty important because they would cover stuff that music papers wouldn't cover. Because there's a naivety to it as well, which is really good. But the naivety meant they didn't really understand how music was done, or they didn't understand which bands were which. And I liked all that. They just wrote about anything they liked, you know, which is pretty pure, really. But like, you know, when Oasis started, I mean, obviously no one knew what he was doing, but the rest of the band are just playing what comes into that, you know, just jamming along, making it all fit together. It's not nobody's got a degree in music. Everyone's just trying to work it out, isn't it? And there's something great about that sort of attitude to it. So it's the same with writing, isn't it? You know, it's I think pre-internet, the fanzines were the only alternative. You know, and a lot of the fanzine writers would end up going to write for the music press. So it was a channel of writers as well, which helped.
Was glam rock your like first introduction into music and what you were first to
Oh
find
yeah,
out?
complete. I was a glam rock kid, you know. I was 12, 13, watched Top of the Pops, Bowie Bolan, of course, but all the glam rock. I like Slade, Sweet. I loved Mock the Hoople. Even stuff like Mud's great singles, you know. And some of it's not cool, some of it's cool. Roxy music. I mean, I didn't have any idea what was cool and what wasn't. You know, I just liked it. I like all the mad outfits. I like the big stomping songs, and to this day, I love them all. To this day, I love Sparks. It was still fucking amazing, and Noel's into all that as well. I thought Noel because I was thinking Noel being a lot younger than me, but he's only 6 years younger than me. He's 58, Noel, and he's like the last of the punk generation to make it. So he was like a little kid when punk came along, but he loved the Pistols. And the first band he saw was the Damned, and he saw Adam the Ants at the Apollo. And so he's just on the edge of that thing, but he also has memories of glam as well. So he's like he's gone on the same sort of journey as me, but a younger version. So, but he was a big fan of glam as well. He was saying in the book, actually, that he used to bring his glam tape to play in the Inspired Carpets tour van. And they go, you can't play that. Because it's not trendy, is it? I mean, obviously, Bowie, Bowl and all, but Slade or whatever wouldn't be trending on. And he was saying, like, when music critics was like him off for sounding like Slade, and he was going, what's wrong with sounding like Slade? I totally agree with him. Slade were a brilliant band. The Noddy Holder's got one of the greatest voices of any singer in this country ever. He's a fucking fantastic singer. Just because he wore mad outfits does not stop him being a great singer. They're self-deprecating, Slade, because the Brummies, Brummies don't brag. It's I'm supposed to roll right. I'm lucky, really. It's like Manx have to brag to get out of the city, don't they? But Brummies don't, do they? So they kind of do themselves down too much, and Slade deserve way more respect.
Yeah, I think people just think of Slade for that Christmas record, but they have got a lot of great hits.
That Christmas record's a great record. I mean, you just hear it too much. You hear it, you forget what a great song it is. It's actually, originally they wrote it, it's quite an old song of theirs, and it's written as a sort of psychedelic 60s song. So when you listen to it with that in your head, it's Christmas, but it's a bit more, it's got really good chords in it. It just was, I remember the day it came out because my brother went to buy it. I remember going to the record shop to get it with my brother, and we just played it over and over, go, wow, this is a great song, and it's, but now it's just, they get done the earn about $100,000 a year off it. That's good, isn't it? Drummer. I do a literary festival in Manchester every year, Books and Music Fest, and we invite the drummer Don Powell every year because he's fucking great. Don, he stands there and he looks completely baffled because everybody's going, "Whoa, Don Powell!" running up and having their picture taken with him, and he's going, "I'm just a drummer in I'm not even a very good drummer." And I go, "You're a fucking great drummer. He's a powerhouse drummer." And it's just great to have him there every year and that.
What was the first record you bought? Can you remember?
Oh God, don't get. It was either Steve Harley's "Come Up and See Make Me Smile," or it might have been Sea Moon and Hi 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 by Wings. That was a great record. Nobody ever talks about Sea Moon, do they? Because obviously Paul McCartney now is he wasn't cool for years, was he? But now I think after Get Back, the film, the Beatles series, so people think, oh fucking hell, he actually was the Beatles. He wasn't like this guy going like this all the time doing the frog chorus. He was super talented, and he was keeping the whole thing together, wasn't he? And then you think, oh wait a minute, it's not. He's not just the pretty face, is he? He's fucking really important. But so even saying all that, and people, even Wings have been to a certain extent revalued because they did have great records in the early days. But nobody ever mentioned "See Me" was actually a top 5 hit, and it's like a little mad little reggae song played in the piano, but it's a really good tune. I still love it to this day.
You mentioned there Paul McCartney kind of wasn't cool at one point after the Beatles. Do you think that's pretty crazy with Oasis, how they've always kept that coolness and popularity?
They kept the popularity, but there's chunks of time, if you're talking in music press terms, that they're not cool. I mean, some of the reviews of the book are saying, how in the music papers, whatever, the music magazines, it's an impossible task. How can you say these records are any good? They're awful. They don't like them, do they? I mean, what did Noel say? He said they set the stage Blur and Britpop, then we turned up and they never forgave us. So it's grudging, isn't it, with Oasis? I mean, you won't get a mojo spread on the brilliance of Oasis. You just, they write about them and try not to mention the fact they didn't like the music that much. They looked on as being derivative, lucky, blah blah blah, whatever. That's a general sort of music media take on them, innit? And then when I think when you get a band that's that big, you really have to reevaluate. You don't have to go like it. You can like what you want, but you have to think this is a cultural phenomenon. How did that happen? I was thinking now with Coldplay. I'm not a massive fan of Coldplay's music, but on my website, I'm not interested in somebody saying they're really boring, they're not very interesting. I want to know why they're so big. I want someone to write me a review of one of their records explaining what it works about them. You know, and I'm more interested in that really than just another little list of reasons why some weirdo in a bedroom on their own doesn't like Coldplay.
I think with Oasis as well, their later albums, as you show in the book, are pretty underrated. Like, Don't Believe the Truth is
Massively.
one of their best albums, I think.
Yeah, they were making really good records. They found the mojo again. In fact, their whole career arc is quite interesting, isn't it? So the first three albums, it just gets madder and madder and madder. Don't know, they're taking more and more drugs. They get to the very top. Be Here Now, they're the biggest band, you know, they're probably the biggest band in the world at that point. Taking an insane amount of coke and making a completely insane record, don't they? Which Noel doesn't like, he don't like the production on it, does he? Although when I went to interview him in March, he played me these demos of Liam singing the songs with just an acoustic. Fucking hell, they did sound good, you know, like he just sat there, Noel's going, Missy's vocals are amazing on this, you know, and he's fanboying it, you know, like Liam singing on it, which is great to see. So the songs sound good stripped down, but I actually like them. I like the ridiculous, over the top nature of it. I like the way the songs are 9 minutes long, hundreds of guitar solos. They're in a ridiculous place. Then you know they're the toppermost of the poppermost. They're in that room at the top of showbiz that no one else can ever get into, taking all loads and loads of drugs and just being absolutely crazy. And they made a record that sounded like it, so it's perfect. And then the next album is basically the breakdown record, isn't it? So, um, you know, Noel's burned out, the coach's giving him panic attacks. They basically get rid of everybody, don't they? Like the band leave. You don't work with Brian Cannon anymore. They're not in creation anymore. It's almost a solo record. It's like two solo records, and it's like Liam and Noel making it. Maybe it's a duo record, not a solo record. And Manella Mike plays drums on it. But it's basically the Gallagher brothers, and it's the post Be Here Now burnout records. And then after that, it's just them going up in steps, going back to being a rock and roll band again in little steps. But I quite liked the introspective Oasis. I mean, I like the way they made a record like drum loops and it's quite dark and stuff. You know, it's and in that period of the later albums, which people always say, "Oh no, you don't need to listen to those." There's loads and loads of really interesting things to do. So you get to the final album and it's got like drum loops on it. It's like drum and bass and parts, you know, like because Noel's a big fan. You know, he's a big fan of Acid House, and also he followed that through. He's a big fan of Chemical Brothers, Goldie, all that kind of stuff, the DJ culture. And he's mixing it together on the last album. Which I thought that's weird. Nobody's ever seemed to have noticed this. there's like a couple of tunes with drum and bass. There's one that copies German underground bands from the mid 70s. Which, if you've been a cool band and done it, people call you a genius.
We mentioned glam rock then. Can you remember when punk came along and how important that was for you?
Oh yeah, God, yeah, yeah. I read about it in newspapers. And then when I was only 15, so the only place you could hang out at 15 in Blackpool where I grew up was the skating rink. So you hang around there and they play all the punk records in the world, three of them, because it's Northern Soul mainly in there. And they play and go, wow. And they sound like glam rock again, you know, Anakin UK sound like glam rock to me, you know, that's big stomping song. So I liked it, but it wasn't like overnight you became a punk because you had no idea what a punk was. You didn't. It wasn't like you could go and buy the clothes in a local shop. There weren't any, you know. Or the only trousers you get were flares. You couldn't even work out how to like take your trousers in, so they weren't flared anymore. So like now, whenever a culture comes in, you can just mail order all the clothes, the music, You can instant culture in it then it was all like, fucking hell, I'm into this punk thing, but how do I do it? And also, it was scary because people beat you up for being a punk. So if you had slightly shorter hair, people actually like fight you in the streets. It was pretty mad, you know. So it took about a year to hone it down to become, well, even then, like you look at most punks in the north of England, 77, 78, it's not Malcolm McLaren and Vivian Westwood gear. It's just slightly less flared trousers and an anorak.
you know,
Getting a leather jacket was a quest. Fucking hell, even getting Doc Martens was difficult. Yeah.
like you said, you grew up in Blackpool. Was there a scene there, or would you have to go to like Manchester, London, and these big cities?
Oh, there was a scene in Blackpool, but it was a very DIY homemade. There's a lot of bands, a lot of kids went to make bands who didn't know what they were doing really, but they put them together. But Manchester was only 50 miles away, so And there was a band in Blackpool called Section 25 who were on Factory Records, and Ian Curtis was a massive fan of theirs. And he'd go around to their house, and he'd help them get their band together. And Tony Wilson would turn up sometimes to go see them play in Blackpool. So we were an outlier, and we were a long way away, but we weren't completely disconnected. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I read online that the Membranes were it's a link to Oasis, like you mentioned before, were on Creation, but were the first band Creation sang?
We were going to be, but McGee had no money, so we couldn't afford to go to the studio. So we went to another label.
Do you wish you were on Creation, or were you happy with the
Well,
other label?
kind of, in a way, it would have been good to be because, but we would have been the first singles before the Mary Chain, which is sort of collectible, aren't they? But a lot of people don't really like them that much, do they? There's some good ones in those early Creation records, but yeah, it would be nice because it's just a nice little historical footnote, isn't it? Like, and also because we were really good pals, so it would have been a nice reflection of that time. You know, we fell out and became good pals again.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Well, and everyone was mad, weren't they? You know, everyone coming out. We're all maniacs. You know, we thought we knew best about everything. Of course, if you've got a label run by one like that and somebody in a band like that, you're gonna have an argument at some point, aren't
Exactly.
you?
How do you look back at that post-punk scene you were with the Membranes?
Oh, it's great. I love that music to this day. And it's interesting because Noel likes a lot of that stuff as well. You know, people think of Noel just being, a couple of Beatles records, but he's really into it. He likes Section 25. You know, he did this great Spotify playlist a couple of years ago, and he's full of bands like that. Yargo, Chameleons. He's a music head, you know. That's why I always spoke to him years ago. Is that Manchester 50 were the music heads. We liked everything. We didn't like oh, you can't like this, you can't like that. You were curious about all music, you know. You watch all different things, listen to all different things, and yeah.
You've got a YouTube channel where you interview people, and obviously the fanzine and stuff. You've interviewed people for ages. Who is your favourite interview?
Um, I like all these different reasons. I don't think people don't have to be super eloquent and be able to explain what they do. Or they can, you know, if they just if it, you know, you ask Pete Hook where his bass lines come from because they're brilliant bass lines. He just looks completely baffled. He just says, "I just play the bass and there they are," you know. And it's I like that. It keeps a mystery in it. It's not contrived. It just is, you know. And so it's yes, but then there's some people really good at explaining what they do and they're really culturally switched on. And I mean, they're good chats, them, aren't they? Really interesting talks and that. But I don't think anybody has to be a brilliant interviewee. You know, they've already done the work. They made a great piece of art, and we're just talking about it. You know, and it's if they talk about it in little grunts, that's up to them. Or if they can spend hours explaining it, that's cool as well. You know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You were the first person ever to interview Nirvana. Could you see where they were going to go?
No, I just thought they'd be one of those weird bands that only me and about 10 other people like. Just no idea they're going to get that massive. And then, yeah, so I phoned him up at his mum's house. It was a phone interview, and I was writing the answers down as he was going to. I didn't know anything about them. I heard the first single before it came out. I thought he was a brilliant singer, and that was it, really. Yeah.
How did you get like his home contact back then?
And when it was coming out on Sub Pop, the single, so so I spoke to the press agent dude, and he got his mum's phone. I've still got the number actually, so I think I might ring it up. I wonder who lives there now. And then 8 months later, he went out to New York, and they were doing a support tour, and we stayed with them for 4 days. There was no hotel. We got there, thought it was going to be a hotel because sounds, you know, it's like big music papers, but we got there and fucking there's no hotel, so we had to stay with the band and the headline band because they're a support band. So we were just stuck in this tiny little flat for 4 days in New York, which at the time was a pain in the arse. But then, like now, it's like I have a great story. I've got I hung around with Nirvana for 4 days, helping them get their gear in out of the flat, watching them play to 20 people, kind of story, you know. Otherwise, we'd just interview them for half an hour and that's it. But we got to sort of know them in that little tiny little piece of very intense time.
What were they like to hang around with like that? I know you said like it was a pain in the ass back then, but looking back now,
Kurt was very quiet. but every night he would just curl up in a ball in the corner. He didn't have a sleep bag. Well, we didn't have a sleep bag either because we didn't think we thought we were in the hotel. Um, then Chris was the main talker. There was a different band lineup. You know, it's a four-piece then. Jason Everman played guitar for him. And he was nice. We hung out with him quite a lot. So we walked around New York with him. It's the first time he'd been to New York, so he was dead excited. Then he got sacked at the end of that tour, Jason. Then he joined Soundgarden. And then he ended, this is a very gentle guy. He ended up in the American Marines and he was in Afghanistan for 10 years. I was thinking, fucking hell, that's some career curve. I didn't expect that at all, you know. I've always been, I might track him down because I really like to say, hey, remember me from 40 years ago, whatever it was? I like your life. Fucking hell, let's talk about your life. That's gone on a weird curve, you know. So, yeah, I might see if he's around. It's a good great thing about the internet. You can just go and find people, can't you?
That'd be a great interview. That just like saying that career change out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's a really weird. I heard he was doing it. So wow, he's not doing it now. He's back in Seattle and he's got some band together. So he's quite probably will be able to find him quite easily in that. Yeah.
So we spoke about fanzines. These days, you've got Louder Than War, like the online fanzine. How's that going?
I've got really well. Yeah, we've got a really good team of people. People can write about what they want, and yeah, we've kept it going for 13 years now, and you can't make a career out of it because the internet's really hard to make any money. And I know it's not all about money, but people need to eat in between and things. But we keep trying to find ways that we can make it pay, so we can pay everyone to do stuff because it's the honourable thing to do. But as communicating music, it's done really well. You know, so it's going good. Yeah, really good.
You seem very busy when we were speaking before. Obviously, you've got the Membranes on tour. We're on tour last year. You've got your books, Louder Than War. What are you up to these days then? And what have you got planned for the future?
Well, I'm doing all those, and oh god, then we've got a Louder Than War festival next year. So we've got a band festival on in Manchester. I did a Louder Than Words festival, which is a music book festival in Manchester. And all summer I'm at festivals. So I'm a compare at Glastonbury this weekend for Billy Bragg. So it's just a lot of different things, you know. I just look at them. I don't see them as being totally different things. Though. They're all different aspects of the same thing, really.
Yeah, you were at that Forever Now festival the other day. How was that?
Oh, it's good. It was, yeah, really good lineup. I was just in conversations there, so I spent most of the day in a little stage at the side of it, just did Jesus Mary Chain. Yeah, did about four interviews, then watched Kraftwerk and the Death Cult. So it's good. The lineup was good. I think we'll talk about doing it again next year, moving it up a level. Yeah, it's a good weekend.
Yeah, it looked like a brilliant lineup. Well, thanks for joining me, John. I've got the book here, Live Forever, The Rise, Fall and Resurrection of Oasis. I'll leave a link in the description if anybody wants to check it out. But thank you for your time, John. It's been great to speak to you.
No, thanks for your time. Thanks for doing the interview. Appreciate it.
Nice one, thank you.
All right. See ya.
See you. Bye. Bye.